Hi everyone and welcome to Page Neuro. My name is Breno Tagliavini and this class is about the basic macroscopic organization of the nervous system and also their origin. First things first, let's differentiate what is central and what is peripheral in the nervous system. So, the central nervous system is the brain and the spinal cord. Everything else is the peripheral nervous system. What could it be? Everything else. Cranial nerves and ganglia, spinal nerves and dorsal root ganglia, for example, sympathetic and parasympathetic nerves and ganglia, and also the enteric nervous system. Now, about the enteric nervous system, there are actually lots of studies nowadays about the influence of the enteric nervous system and the relationship between them and neurodegenerative diseases. I think it's really interesting and you should just check it out online. You can just Google it. There are lots of articles right now going on about this. It's a tip for you. So, here we have lots of images, just like as a visual slide for you to understand what is central and what is peripheral in the nervous system. Here we have the brain and the spinal cord. So, central is on this axial part, and everything else on this image is the peripheral. All those little and tiny nerves and also the major nerves are the peripheral. Here we have a lateral view of the brain and also the spinal cord. So central nervous system is this, and here on a posterior view, we have the posterior aspect of the brain, also the cerebellum and the spinal cord. So everything here is central, and from this part on, peripheral. Here we have a relationship between the cranial nerves and the central nervous system, and here it's just another different image, for example, from an inferior view of the brain, but just for showing you the relationship between the central and the peripheral nervous system. So, the embryological development of the central nervous system. First, we have three main divisions of the central nervous system development. We have the forebrain, or the prosencephalon, which is the green area here, the midbrain, or the mesencephalon, which is the reddish area, and the hindbrain, or the rhomboencephalon, here in orange. And we also have the spinal cord. The spinal cord will be the spinal cord since an embryo life, it will just become the spinal cord. And how does it develop? The central nervous system develops actually from a sheet of ectodermal cells that will fold and fold and fold over and over to form the neural tube. Okay. Now, like this conceptual map shows you the difference between the specific parts and what, for example, the prosencephalon will give rise to, also the mesencephalon and also the rhomboencephalon, and the spinal cord will be the spinal cord, as I told you before. So, the prosencephalon is subdivided into two parts. The telencephalon will give rise to the cerebral hemispheres, the cerebral cortex, the basal forebrain nuclei, the subcortical white matter, and the basal ganglia. The other part from the prosencephalon, or the forebrain, is the diencephalon, which will give rise to the epithalamus, thalamus, and hypothalamus. Okay. Now, the mesencephalon, or the midbrain, will give rise to the cerebral peduncles, the tectum of the midbrain, and the tegmentum of the midbrain. Okay. And now the rhomboencephalon is subdivided into two, for example, as the prosencephalon, but those two subdivisions are called the metencephalon and the myelencephalon. The metencephalon will give rise to the cerebellum and the pons, and the myelencephalon to the medulla oblongata. Okay, here we have the same information but on another visual slide, but from a posterior view of the embryo. The 5 weeks, the same image, but this is a lateral and this is a posterior view. So the telencephalon, the cerebral hemisphere, cerebral cortex, and subcortical white matter, basal ganglia, and basal forebrain nuclei. the diencephalon, the thalamus, hypothalamus, and epithalamus. Now mesencephalon, or the midbrain, the cerebral peduncles, the midbrain tectum, the midbrain tegmentum. Rhomboencephalon, or hindbrain, two different parts, the metencephalon, that will give rise to the pons and the cerebellum, and the myelencephalon, the medulla oblongata. The spinal cord. Okay, now we have a specific subject that is called the brainstem. What is the brainstem? Formerly, the brainstem was like the midbrain, the pons, the medulla oblongata, and the cerebellum and the diencephalon. But nowadays we disconsider this information because of clinical knowledge. Let's say like this clinical knowledge. We consider the brainstem to be the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla oblongata. Only those three parts. Okay. Now, talking about the forebrain. Forebrain actually means, for example, prosencephalon in Greek means end brain. So which is like the most developed part of the brain itself. And it's subdivided, as I told you, to the telencephalon and the diencephalon. The telencephalon will give rise to the cerebral cortex, or the great matter, and the white matter, so the axons beneath the cortex, and also the basal ganglia, which are like nuclei of neurons deep into the brain. Let's say like this, on a easier way for you to understand. Now, the diencephalon will give rise to the thalamus and the hypothalamus. Also, we have the epithalamus, the epithalamus and the subthalamus, but I won't talk about this. I can only show you now because it will be a lot of information that you just shouldn't stick with it, because if not, it will just be too overwhelming for this lecture. But the thalamus is this round-like structure here, and the hypothalamus, hypo means under, the thalamus is this blue part here. So the thalamus, this round-like, and the hypothalamus, this specific region where I'm pointing the mouse. Okay, so the mesencephalon, or the midbrain, is this specific region that will give rise to the cerebral pedunculi, the tectum of the midbrain, and also the tegmentum of the midbrain. But okay, the cerebral pedunculi are two stem-like structures that connect to from the forebrain to the pons and down way, let's say. Now the rhomboencephalon, as I told you, the cerebellum here on this structure, and also the pons are the metencephalon, and the myelencephalon will give rise to the medulla oblongata, which is this part. Okay, now I will show you specifically, oh, I forgot about the spinal cord, after the medulla oblongata. Now I have some important landmarks, and I will explain you also why they are important and why they are named as they are. For example, we have the midbrain diencephalic junction. Midbrain is this structure here, and the diencephalon is this. So we have the midbrain and diencephalon junction. It is this part. Here we have the pontomesencephalic pons here, and the mesencephalon. So pontomesencephalic junction. Pontomedullary junction. Pons and the medulla oblongata. So pontomedullary junction. And cervical. Why cervical? Because it is from the cervical spinal cord, and medullary. So cervical from the cervical spinal cord, and medullary from the medulla oblongata junction. So cervical medullary junction. So thank you a lot for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and share this video with your friends. Also, if you want to have some particular classes with me, you can find me on superprof.de. I can share you the specific link down below. And I really hope that you enjoy this new format of videos. And let's be together for understanding more and more each day of the central nervous system, also the peripheral nervous system, also neuroanatomy, neurology, neurosurgery, and neuroscience. Let's say I will share Neuro for All. So thank you.